hurried into the next room. There were several rows of the bulky tables in there, each with its own chair. Broom's footsteps sounded loud in the room, the echoes rebounding from the walls. He stopped and looked down. This floor wasn't covered with a soft carpeting. It was a square mosaic pattern, as though it might be composed of tile of some kind. And yet, though it was harder than the carpet, it had kind of a queer resiliency of its own. The room itself was larger than the one he had just quitted, and not as well lit. For the first time he thought of the possibility that there might be someone else here beside himself. He looked around, wishing that he had a weapon of some kind. Even a knife would have made him feel better. But there had been no chance of that, of course. Prisoners of war are hardly allowed to carry weapons with them, so none had been available. He wondered what sort of men lived in this fantastic city. So far he had seen no one. The streets below had been filled with moving vehicles of some kind, but it had been difficult to tell whether there had been anyone walking down there from this height. Contarini had said that it would be... How had he said it? Like sleeping for hundreds of years and waking up in a strange world. Well, it was that all right. Did anyone know he was here? He had the uneasy feeling that hidden, unseen eyes were watching his every move, and yet he could detect nothing. There was no sound except the faint humming from the device in the room behind him, and a deeper, almost inaudible rushing, rumbling sound that seemed to come from far below. His wish for a weapon came back stronger than before. The very fact that he had seen no one sent his nerves on edge even more than the sight of a known enemy would have done. He was suddenly no longer interested in his surroundings. He felt trapped in this strange, silent room. He could see a light shining through a door at the far end of the room. Perhaps it was a way out. He walked toward it, trying to keep his footsteps as silent as possible as he moved. The door had a pane of translucent glass in it, and there were more of the unreadable characters on it. He wished fervently that he could decipher them. They might tell him where he was. Carefully he grasped the handle of the door, twisted it, and pulled. And carefully as he had been, the door swung inward with surprising rapidity. It was a great deal thinner and lighter than he had supposed. He looked down at it, wondering if there was any way the door could be locked. There was a tiny vertical stud set in the small metal panel in the door, but it was much too tiny to be a keyhole. Still, it didn't matter. If necessary, he could smash the glass to get through the door. He stepped out into what was obviously a hallway beyond the door. The hallway stretched away to either side, lined with doors similar to the one he had just come through. How did a man get out of this place, anyway? The door behind him was pressed against his hand with patient insistence, as though it wanted to close itself. He almost let it close, but at the last second he changed his mind. Better the devil we know than the devil we don't, he thought to himself. He went back into the office and looked around for something to prop the door open. He found a small, beautifully formed porcelain dish on one of the desks, picked it up, and went back to the door. The dish held the door open an inch or so. That was good enough. If someone locked the door, he could still smash the door if he wanted to, but the absence of the dish when he returned would tell him that he was not alone in the mysterious place. He started down the hallway to his right, checking the doors as he went. They were all locked. He knew that he could break into any of them, but he had a feeling that he would find no exit through any of them. They all looked as though they concealed more of the big rooms. None of them had any lights behind them. Only the one door that he had come through showed the telltale glow from the other side. Why? He had the terrible feeling that he had been drawn across time to this place for a purpose, and that he could think of no rational reason for believing so. He stopped as another memory came back. He remembered being in the stone-walled dungeon, with its smelly straw beds, lit only by the faint shaft of sunlight that came from the barred windows high overhead. Contarini, the short, wiry little Italian who was in the next cell, looked at him through the narrow opening. "I still think it can be done, my friend. It is the mind and the mind alone that sees the flow of time. The body experiences, but does not see. Only the soul is capable of knowing eternity." Broom outranked the little Italian. "But prison can make brothers of all men. You think it's possible, then, to get out of a place like this simply by thinking about it?" Contarini nodded. "Why not? Did not the saints do so? And what was that? Contemplation of the eternal, my comrade. Contemplation of the eternal." Broom held back a grin. "Then why, my Venetian friend, Have you not left this place long since?" "I try," Contarini had said simply, "but I cannot do it. You wish to know why? It is because I'm afraid." "Afraid?" Broom raised an eyebrow. He had seen Contarini on the battlefield dealing death in hand-to-hand combat, and the Italian hadn't impressed him as a coward. "Yes," said the Venetian, "afraid. Oh, I am not afraid of men. I fight. Some day I may die. Will die. This does not frighten me, death. I am not afraid of what men may do to me." He stopped and frowned. "But of this I have a great fear. Only a saint can handle such things, and I am no saint." "I hope, my dear Contarini," Broom said dryly, "that you are not under the impression that I am a saint." "No, perhaps not," Contarini said. "Perhaps not. But you are braver than I. I am not afraid of any man living. But you are afraid of neither the living nor the dead, nor of man or evil, which is a great deal more than I can say for myself. Besides, there is blood of kings in your veins. And has not a king protection that even a man of noble birth such as yourself does not have? I think so. Oh, I have no doubt that you could do it, if you but would. And then perhaps when you are free you would free me, for teaching you all that I know to accomplish this. My fear holds me chained here, but you have no chains of fear." Broom had thought that over for a moment, then grinned. "All right, my friend. I'll try it. What's your first lesson?" The memory faded from Broom's mind. Had he really moved through some segment of eternity to reach this place? Had he? He felt a chill run through him. What was he doing here? How could he have taken it all so calmly? Afraid of man or devil? No. But this was neither. He had to get back. The utter alienness of this bright, shining, lifeless wonderland was too much for him. Instinctively he turned and ran back toward the room he had left. If he got back to the place where he had appeared in this world, perhaps somehow some force would return him to where he belonged. The door was as he had left it, the porcelain dish still in place. He scooped up the dish in one big hand and ran on into the room, letting the door shut itself behind him. He ran on, through the large room with its many tables, into the brightly lighted room beyond. He stopped. What could he do now? He tried to remember the things that the Italian had told him to do, and he could not for the life of him remember them. His memory still had gaps in it, gaps he did not know were there because he had not yet probed for them. He closed his eyes in concentration, trying to bring back a memory that would not come. He did not hear the intruder until the man's voice echoed in the room. Broom's eyes opened, and instantly every muscle and nerve in his hard-trained body tensed for action. There was a man standing in the doorway of the office. He was not a particularly impressive man. In spite of the queer cut of his clothes, he was not as tall as Broom, and he looked soft and overfed. His paunch protruded roundly from the open front of the short coat, and there was a fleshiness about his face that betrayed too much good living. And he looked even more frightened than Broom had been a few minutes before. He was saying something in a language that Broom did not understand, and the tenseness in his voice betrayed his fear. Broom relaxed. He had nothing to fear from this little man. "I won't hurt you," Broom said. "I have no intention of intruding on your property, but all I ask is help." The little man was blinking and backing away as though he was going to turn and bolt at any moment. Broom laughed. "You have nothing to fear from me, little man. Permit me to introduce myself. I am Richard Broom, known as—" He stopped, and his eyes widened. Total memory flooded over him as he realized fully who he was and where he belonged. And the fear hit him again in a raging flood, sweeping over his mind and blotting it out. Again the darkness came. This time the blackness faded quickly. There was a face, a worried face, looking at him through an aperture of the stone wall. The surroundings were so familiar that the bit of memories that had been scattered again during the passage through centuries of time came back more quickly and settled back into their accustomed pattern more easily. The face was that of the Italian Contarini. He was looking both worried and disappointed. "You were not gone long, my Lord King," he said, "but you were gone. Of that there can be no doubt. Why did you return?" Richard Broom sat up on his pallet of straw. The scene in the strange building already seemed dreamlike, but the fear was still there. "I couldn't remember," he said softly. I couldn't remember who I was, nor why I had gone to that place.